In the hustle and bustle of a crowded airport, one flight would become the stage for a shocking encounter no one could have predicted. A tired mother, balancing her young child and a small carry-on, boarded the plane, hoping for nothing more than a peaceful journey. But things took a sharp turn when a flight attendant singled her out, making condescending remarks and treating her with disdain. The humiliation was palpable, and the other passengers were left in uncomfortable silence. What the flight attendant didn't realize, however, was that this woman wasn't alone in her fight for dignity. As tensions reached a boiling point, an unexpected figure appeared, her son, a successful CEO with the power to turn the situation around. How would this confrontation unfold? And would justice prevail for a mother who only wanted to be treated with respect? Stay tuned to uncover this emotional and eye-opening story. As the plane began boarding, the young mother quietly made her way to her seat, trying her best to settle her restless toddler. She was visibly exhausted, her face marked by the strain of travel and the challenges of motherhood. Despite her efforts to stay out of the way, the flight attendant's sharp voice cut through the cabin. "Ma'am, you're holding up the line. Can you move faster?" The mother apologized softly, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment as passengers avoided eye contact. Moments later, another comment followed when the child accidentally knocked a small item into the aisle. "You need to control your child," the attendant snapped, loud enough for everyone to hear. Whispers rippled through the rows, but no one spoke up. The mother's distress was evident, but she quietly endured the treatment. Unbeknownst to the flight attendant, her CEO's son had just entered the plane, witnessing everything from the back of the cabin. As the flight attendant continued her rounds, she seemed to single out the young mother at every opportunity. When the child cried briefly during takeoff, the attendant shot her a cold glare, muttering under her breath about consideration for other passengers. The mother sank deeper into her seat, trying to soothe her child while holding back tears. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to intervene. From the back of the cabin, her son watched everything unfold, his sharp eyes taking in the subtle but unmistakable prejudice in the flight attendant's tone and behavior. He was a man who had built his career by standing up for what was right, but in this moment, he stayed silent, calculating his next move. Meanwhile, the whispers among passengers grew louder. Some quietly expressed sympathy, while others speculated about why the mother wasn't standing up for herself. The tension in the air was undeniable, and everyone felt that something was about to happen. As the flight settled into cruising altitude, the tension in the cabin was impossible to ignore. The flight attendant approached the mother yet again, her tone sharper than ever. This time, it was over the small bag stored beneath the seat. "This is blocking the aisle. It needs to go in the overhead compartment," she said curtly, despite the fact that it posed no real issue. The mother hesitated, juggling her child and trying to comply. Her hands shook as she reached for the bag, but before she could stand, the attendant scoffed, muttering, "Some people just don't belong here." That was the moment her son decided enough was enough. Rising from his seat, his imposing figure instantly drew attention. Heads turned as he calmly but firmly walked down the aisle, each step deliberate. The flight attendant looked up, startled by the interruption, but the man's expression gave nothing away, calm yet commanding, like someone used to having authority. He stopped next to his mother, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder before addressing the attendant. "Excuse me," he began, his voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. The cabin fell silent, every passenger now holding their breath. It was clear something big was about to unfold. The flight attendant stiffened, her confident demeanor faltering under the man's unwavering gaze. "Is there an issue here?" he asked, his voice calm, but carrying a weight that demanded respect. The attendant hesitated, glancing between him and the young mother. "No issue," she said quickly, her tone defensive. But the passengers were watching closely now, sensing the shift in power. Without waiting for her response, he continued, "Because from where I'm standing, It seems my mother has been treated unfairly since the moment she boarded this plane." His words hung in the air, and a ripple of murmurs spread through the cabin. The mother's eyes widened as she realized her son was stepping in, but before she could protest, he turned to her. "You don't deserve this, Mom," he said softly, his voice full of warmth and reassurance. The flight attendant, attempting to regain control, interrupted. "Sir, I was only enforcing airline policy." He cut her off, his tone now firmer. "Policy? Or personal judgment? Because I've been watching, and I know the difference." Just as the tension reached its peak, a man seated a few rows away suddenly spoke up. "He's right. I've seen everything too. This is unacceptable." Another passenger chimed in, and soon voices of support filled the cabin, shattering the silence that had hung heavy before. The flight attendant's face paled as the momentum turned against her, but then, to everyone's shock, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been made aware of a situation on board, and I'll be stepping out shortly to address it personally." The room fell silent again, passengers exchanging wide-eyed looks. What would the captain's intervention bring, and how would this escalating confrontation play out? The cabin grew still as the captain emerged from the cockpit, his presence commanding immediate attention. He walked directly to the young mother's row, his expression unreadable. "I understand there's been an issue," he said, his tone professional but firm. Before the flight attendant could speak, the son stepped forward. "Yes, Captain," he said, meeting the captain's gaze. "My mother has been repeatedly disrespected by this attendant. Her actions have been not only unprofessional, but blatantly discriminatory." His voice was steady, but his words carried a sharp edge. The captain turned to the flight attendant, whose face was now flushed with embarrassment. "Is this true?" he asked her, his tone leaving no room for evasion. The attendant stammered, struggling to justify her behavior. But before she could answer, another passenger stood up. "I saw it all," she said. "He's telling the truth." One by one, others began to speak, confirming the son's account. The captain sighed deeply, addressing the flight attendant. "I'm afraid your actions leave no choice but to file a formal report. I'll need you to step aside for the remainder of the flight." Gasps filled the cabin as she reluctantly walked away, her confidence shattered. Just as the mother reached for her son's hand to thank him, the captain turned to them. "I owe you both an apology," he said. "Your experience today doesn't reflect our values." He paused, then added, "And it seems there's something you should know. I recognized your son the moment I saw him. His company has been a key partner with this airline, and his influence here is significant." The mother's eyes widened as the truth sank in. Her son's silent power had been far greater than she realized. The captain offered them upgraded seats for the remainder of the flight, and as they settled in, the mother looked at her son with pride. But as the plane prepared to land, a passenger sitting nearby leaned over and whispered, "You stood up for your mom, but really, you stood up for all of us. Thank you." Her son nodded, a small smile on his face. Justice had been served, but it was clear the impact of this moment would linger far beyond the flight. As the plane touched down, a quiet sense of relief and reflection filled the cabin. The young mother, now seated comfortably with her son beside her, glanced out the window, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for the resolution but for the unwavering love and support of her son. Passengers began gathering their belongings, but many paused to offer kind words. "You inspired us," one man said softly, while another added, "It's rare to see someone take such a stand." The mother smiled warmly, her heart full.